Haunting secrets exposed, 3 terrifying true horror stories that will chill you to the bone. The chilling wind whistled through the abandoned house, a place where nightmares linger and dark secrets refuse to stay buried. It stood on the outskirts of town, a crumbling relic of the past, covered in vines like nature's own cloak of shame. No one dared to step inside after dusk. They whispered stories of shadows flickering in the corners, phantom laughter echoing through the halls, and one horrible night when the owner, old Mrs. Abernathy, vanished without a trace. Her empty rocking chair creaked eerily on the porch, forever swaying in a ghostly breeze as the sun dipped below the horizon, transforming the sky into fiery hues. Darkness slowly cloaked the house in an oppressive silence. Local teens, intrigued by its ominous allure, told tales of a mirror swallowing the souls of anyone who dared gaze too long. It was said that in that cursed glass, you could see your worst fears materialize, the loss of loved ones, last breaths, and screams trapped within walls. A group of friends made a pact to spend the night inside, but they didn't know the true horrors that awaited them. They stepped inside, their laughter faltering when the door creaked shut behind them. A sudden chill swept through the air, tightening their chests. "Did you feel that?" one girl whispered, her voice shaking as shadows danced menacingly on the walls. "It's just the wind," another scoffed, but his bravado crumbled as he caught sight of the mirror's reflection, a twisted version of reality, where his friends looked as if they were fading away. The creeping sensation clawed at their minds, threatening to tear them apart. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. But the night was just beginning. As shadows grew bolder, chilling whispers echoed in the silence, calling to them with a voice that wrapped around their hearts, squeezing tightly. "Leave now before it's too late." The word sent shivers racing down their spines, an icy reminder that they weren't just trespassers, they were guests at a deadly party. One friend, shaking, darted toward the door as if it could offer salvation, but found it locked, a heavy weight barring their escape. Panic surged as they realized they weren't alone, not anymore. What haunted them had teeth, and it was hungry. What kind of horrors awaited them in the heart of that cursed house? What secrets were astray, waiting to be unearthed? The air thickened with an electric tension, each breath a struggle as they stood frozen, wide-eyed, in the dim light of the hall. The whispers seemed to ricochet off the peeling wallpaper, bouncing around like malicious spirits eager to invade their minds. "What do we do?" one girl whimpered, her knuckles white as she clutched her friend's arm. "We can't just stand here." Dread seeped into their bones. Those shadows, were they moving? The dark corners seemed to pulse, alive with menace. Jake, the most reckless of the group, took a shaky step forward. "We need to find another way out," he urged, his voice trembling. But fear had rooted the others in place, each too terrified to move. Just as he turned to convince them, a sudden bang echoed from a room at the end of the hallway. They all flinched, instinctively huddling together. "Maybe it's just an animal," Mike suggested, but even he didn't believe the lie. The sound resonated again, sharper, more urgent this time, demanding their attention. "Let's check it out," Jake insisted, sounding braver than he felt. They formed a hesitant line, inching toward the source of the noise. As they approached, the door stood slightly ajar, an invitation laced with warning. "On 3, Jake whispered, heart pounding. 1, 2. Before he could finish, he threw the door wide open. The room was shrouded in darkness, the only light filtering from the hallway behind them. In the middle of the room stood the mirror, grand and haunting. It shimmered with an eerie glow, reflecting nothing but shadows. A wicked feeling washed over them, the very air vibrated with tension. "What are we looking for?" Sarah asked, her voice no louder than a whisper. But the words caught in Jake's throat as he gazed into the glass. Their reflections twisted grotesquely. It wasn't just their faces, but their deepest fears materializing before them. Mike saw himself alone, his family standing over an empty grave. Sarah's nightmare played out like a horror movie. She was trapped, screaming, as shadows closed in around her. "No! Get away!" Jake shouted, his heart racing, ripping his eyes from the glass. Panic gripped him as he turned to his friends. "We have to break it." But they stood frozen, succumbing to the visions that paralyzed them. In that moment, a dark presence surged forth. A figure, shrouded in shadows, emerged from the murky depths of the mirror. Its eyes glowed like embers, hungry and twisted with malice. "You've summoned me," it hissed, voice slithering through the air, chilling their very bones. The room morphed into chaos. Shadows spilled over the friends, wrapping around them like a net, dragging them toward the mirror where their last breaths awaited. Desperation clawed at their throats. Sarah screamed, breaking free for a fleeting moment. "Fight it! Don't look!" she yelled, but already, her courage was fading. As they pushed against the shadows, cold hands clutched at their legs, pulling them down into despair. Jake's heart raced as he tried to pull Sarah back, lungs tight with fear. "We can't give in." But the mirror called to them, an enchantment pulled tighter than any grasping hand. Would they become the next victims of this terrible trap, forever lost in a reality where the living and the dead intertwined? And just when all hope seemed lost, a shattering sound interrupted the silence, echoing off the walls and jolting them back to the moment. The door flew open again, as if inviting something or someone else in. What awaited them outside was a chance at freedom, or something far more sinister. What new horror was they about to unleash? The door creaked ominously on its hinges, pushing the darkness in the room back just a little, like an exhalation of the house itself. A figure stood framed in that flickering light, tall and too still. Heartbeats raced in unison, each thump echoing like a drum in Jake's chest. "Who's there?" he stammered, pulling Sarah close, his mind racing. That chill was back, wrapping around him, squeezing tighter. "Is it a prank?" Mike whispered, voice quaking but desperate. "Someone messing with us?" Shadows pooled around their feet, crawling toward the new arrival. The figure stepped forward, and what emerged froze them in fear. A man with wild eyes and hair matted like a tortured soul. His clothes were tattered, and his breath came in ragged gasps. "Run!" he rasped, his voice a guttural warning. "It's coming for you." At that moment, a chill crept deeper into Jake's bones as the darkness writhed, the shadows pulling at him, yearning to reclaim what was theirs. "What do you mean?" he shouted, but his words melted into the heavy silence, drowned by the sound of the man's panicked breaths. A low growl echoed from the depths of the hallway behind the newcomer. It wasn't an animal, no, it was something far more horrifying. The very walls seemed to vibrate with a malevolence that made the air grow thick. The man turned, eyes wide with terror. "You need to leave. Now." Panic gripped them tighter than any shadow, and Jake felt the weight of his friend's fear. It pressed down on his shoulders like an anvil, making every thought feel sluggish. "We can't just leave," he shouted, clenching his fists, desperate to rally them. "We came here together." But as they stood there, locked in a standoff between survival and despair, the shadows surged, a furious tide rising to reclaim their lost treasures. The man lunged towards them, reaching out as if he could drag them away from the terrible fate awaiting them. "Please, I've seen it. I've felt it. You can't let it take you." His voice escalated, cracking with each syllable, weaving through the terror thick in the air. "We don't have time to argue," Sarah cried, pulling Jake back just as the shadow pulled her forward. The darkness was relentless, clawing at their skin, whispering lies of surrender. "Just break the mirror," the man screamed. "It's not them anymore. They're trapped like me." More growls echoed from the hallway, a chorus of agony that sent shivers creeping down their spines. Jake hesitated. What if breaking the mirror unleashed something worse? But they were trapped. No. We are not doing this. Mike yelled, eyes darting, searching for hope. Then in a moment of chaotic courage, Jake grabbed a rusted metal chair that lay discarded in a corner. Screams surged through his friends' lips as they watched him approach the mirror, their intertwined fears twisting like vines around their hearts. Jake, wait. Sarah begged, but his resolve was hardening. Deep within the reflection, shadows surged, distortions forming lost memories of each of their faces. With a cry, Jake hurled the chair at the mirror just as a howl echoed through the darkness, a sound of rage that rattled the very frame of the house. The glass shattered, yet, instead of fragments falling gracefully to the ground, a whirlwind of shadows erupted from within, a league of anguished wails escaping into the room. Jake stumbled back, falling into his friends as darkness poured forth, engulfing them in a subtle embrace of dread. The room pulsed like a heartbeat, thrumming with power, pulling them into a maze of despair. As the shadows began to recede, revealing chilling glimpses of forgotten faces trapped within, the man pointed an accusing, trembling finger at them. You've unleashed it now. It's free run. With that, the world around them began to warp, twisting on itself. What had they awakened? What haunted secrets lay unmasked? Would they succumb to the expanding darkness or discover something that could end the horror for good? Time was running out. The air crackled with dread as the shadows coiled around the room like angry serpents. Jake scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, breath quickening. The man's gaze was piercing, drilling into him like a warning. You've set it free, you have to understand. Suddenly, the growling intensified, echoing down the hallway like a beast roused from a deep slumber. The sound was terrifying, a mix of pain and rage. Each growl felt like a shudder of the earth beneath their feet. Jake turned to Sarah and Mike, their faces turned ghastly pale, eyes wide with terror. In that moment, doubt gnawed at him. Had they just unleashed something that could tear them apart? Move! Sarah shouted, breaking him from his thoughts. She darted for the door, each step a desperate bid for safety. They had to get out. But the shadows had thickened, dragging the darkness into jagged tendrils that whipped at their heels, yearning to tether them back. Jake grabbed Mike by the arm, pulling him alongside. We can't leave him, he cried, nodding to the man who had tried to warn them. But a scream erupted from behind them, cutting through the clamor of growls, a sound so raw and filled with anguish, it sent chills racing down Jake's spine. Run! Don't look back! The figure yelled, his voice cracking. He was losing himself to the shadows, desperation screaming in his eyes. And in that split second, Jake saw something horrifying: a specter, a black shape morphing within the whirl of shadows, twisting into something almost human. It reached for him with elongated fingers that dripped with darkness. Fear struck hard once more. Go! Mike shouted, yanking Jake forward as the darkness lunged. They barreled out the door, slamming into the narrow hallway just as it echoed with frantic wails. The air outside was thick with disorientation. They stumbled into the moonlight, the chill biting into their skin, a cruel reminder of their fresh escape. But as they looked back, the house pulsed like a living entity, absorbing the darkness around them. The man, once a warning, now lost, saw the shadows consume him, replacing any vestige of his humanity. What was that? Sarah gasped, wheezing for air. I don't know, Jake stammered, still pinned in a grip of fear. But before he could finish, the ground beneath them rumbled, a quaking that snatched the breath from their lungs. The darkness from the house began to surge forward like a tidal wave, more alive than before. What is that? I don't know. We need to get out of here. Mike cried, adrenaline rushing through him. Jake's mind raced. Memories flooded in whispers of the cases linked to the house. Everyone who wanted to uncover its truths had disappeared. The stories they say, the shadows. Jake. Sarah yanked his arm. We have to move. They fled down the yard, heartbeats clashing against the thunder of the encroaching shadow. As they turned the corner, Jake met Mike's terrified gaze. "What if we can't get away? We have to find shelter." Mike shouted back, voice frantic, but uncertainty hung thick in the air. Then a realization hit Jake like a punch to the gut. They had broken the mirror. The reflections had been writhing, hadn't they? What if they aren't just spirits? He risked, voice trembling as shadows clawed at their heels. Suddenly, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees, a cold voice mimicking the man from before. "You've set them free, run." The weight of his words bore down on them, pressing against their chests as they dashed toward a tree line in the distance. But as darkness drew closer, Jake knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. Questions churned in his mind. What had they awakened? And what price would they pay to stop it? With the house looming behind them like a predatory beast, heart pounding, they reached the trees. "We need to understand what's happening before it's too late." Little did they know, the darkness was just getting started, and they were far from out of danger. What lay ahead? A horrifying truth that no one should ever discover. Branches whipped against their faces as they plunged deeper into the trees, fear driving them like an unseen wind. The shadows poured out of the house, creeping along the ground, hungry and relentless. Jake could feel their presence, thickening the air around them, brushing against his skin. Just then, a low growl rippled through the underbrush, causing Jake to freeze in place. "Keep moving." Sarah's voice pierced through the darkness, but her words were barely audible over the rustling leaves and distant growls that echoed through the woods. Panic was setting in, intense and suffocating. They stumbled through the thick undergrowth until they found a clearing, moonlight spilling down like a spotlight. It felt momentarily safe, but safety was an illusion. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they glanced back, searching for the encroaching darkness. "What do we do now?" Mike pleaded, his voice trembling. "We can't just stand here." Jake's mind raced. The stories he had heard echoed in his head, whispering of those who faced the shadows. A sudden thought struck him, a possible truth that could offer them some advantage. The mirror, the way it twisted reality. What if it's the shadows we can control somehow? What? How? Sarah was wide-eyed, barely holding on to hope. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her. "Maybe we can, I don't know," Jake hesitated, fishing for certainty. "Find another reflective surface. It might keep them at bay or trap them." "Great idea," Mike snorted, incredulous. "With what, another shattered mirror?" Jake shot him a look, anger and determination ignited within him. "We have to try. It's better than running blind into the dark." Their hearts raced as the growls echoed nearer. The darkness grew thick around them, creeping like a storm rolling in. "Fine. Let us find something," Sarah said, though her voice wavered. "We can't die here." Without another word, they navigated the clearing, eyes scanning the dim light for anything reflective. Panic threatened to overwhelm them as shadows kicked up dust, tendrils swirling, creeping closer, but just as despair threatened to take hold, a glint caught Jake's eye. He rushed towards it, the others hot on his heels. "Jake! What did you find?" He knelt down in awe. There, half buried in the ground, was a broken shard of glass, sharp and jagged. "This!" he yelled, holding it high. As he turned it toward the trees, the silver gleam seemed to repel the shadows briefly. For a fleeting moment, the darkness hesitated, flickering like a dying flame. "It's working!" Mike shouted, excitement sparking in his voice. "Keep it facing them." Jake felt a surge of power in his chest, an ember of hope igniting. But as he held the shard, a chill swept through him. The growling intensified, a chorus of rage, and a massive shape loomed in the distance, edging closer. They exchanged terrified looks, the air thick with dread. "What is that?" Sarah's whisper trembled, with eyes wide. Jake blinked before him, watching the shadows twist and writhe, forming into something monstrous, something they had never prepared to face. Each breath felt strained, the weight of the moment was crushing. Keep it together, Mike urged, though his voice trembled on the edge of panic, but as they braced themselves, the ground shook again, more violently than before, as if the earth was protesting against the power of the darkness. They needed a plan, and fast. The shadows were morphing, coiling around them, whispering promises of despair. "Jake!" Sarah cried, clutching the sides of her head as if to drown out the sounds. "Focus!" he snapped, trying to anchor them both. "We have to figure out how to use this, or we're done." The beast shadowed closer, indistinct but tangible, a grotesque monolith of rage. And with every inch it drew near, Jake felt the shadows deepen their grip on his soul. Suddenly, a thought pierced his mind: what if the disturbance they felt was more than just a manifestation of fear? Maybe it's feeding off of our fear. He shouted, feeling the connection form. "No more fear!" Sarah shouted back, a fierce strength rising within her. "We've come this far. Let us bury it." She stepped forward, eyes blazing with determination. But the darkness didn't just hesitate, it lunged. As Jake lifted the shard defensively, the scream of the shadow creature resonated throughout the trees, leaving them stunned amidst the chaos. Would it be enough to halt this vengeful beast? Or had they only sparked its fury? The fate of the night hung in the balance, and the shadows were hungry. Could they turn the tide, or were they merely pawns in a game far beyond their comprehension? One thing was certain: the next moments could shatter their reality forever. The darkness erupted as the shadow lunged, tendrils of fear coiling around the trio. Jake's heart pounded painfully in his chest, each beat a reminder of their fragile existence. The shard of glass felt like a lifeline, but he couldn't shake the dread creeping into his bones. How long would it hold back such raw malice? The creature's growl was a haunting symphony of despair, echoing through the clearing. Shadows danced wildly, their forms warping as if they were alive, eager to embrace the darkness they inhabited. Mike's grip on Jake's shoulder tightened, a desperate attempt to anchor them both against the unknown. "Jake! We need to." Sarah's words were cut short as the beast surged once more, its grotesque form illuminated by the shard's reflective glow. Suddenly, all three knew they were facing not just a monster but the embodiment of their darkest fears. "Hold it up!" Mike shouted, and the urgency in his voice tore through Jake's paralysis. He lifted the glass higher, the light flickering like a dying star. For a brief moment, the shadows recoiled. "This way!" Jake shouted, urging them backwards toward the dense trees, the only sanctuary they could think of. Moonlight pierced through the leaves as they hurried, their breaths a chaotic rhythm against the murmurs of the night. They could feel the shadows slithering at their heels, hungry, voracious. As they reached a cluster of ancient trees, Sarah stumbled, nearly falling. "I can't feel my legs," she gasped, eyes wide in panic. "They're everywhere. Look for anything else that shines," Jake urged, desperation creeping into his voice. "Anything." In the frantic search, his fingers brushed past leaves and heated ground. Memories flooded back his grandmother's stories of old legends and ancient items that could repel darkness. "There. The trunk," he shouted, pointing at an old oak, its gnarly surface reflecting the moon. Jake pressed the shard against its bark, hoping the combined strength of nature and the shard would force the shadows back. With a guttural roar, the creature charged. Shadows spun around its figure like a swirling storm. Jake felt the power within his hands shift, the glass shard pulsating rhythmically to the creature's frightening advances. "Get behind me," he commanded, positioning himself as a barrier. There was a tremor in his voice, the reality of their situation clawing at him. He remembered the strength they needed, how fear had fueled their foe, and whispered into the night, "No more." Light erupted from the shard, cascading in waves like a flood against the shadow. The growl morphed into a screech, reverberating through the trees as the darkness fragmented under the sudden illumination. It was chaotic, a chaotic symphony of light and shadow, both forces colliding, but as the brilliance surged, so did something darker. From the depths of the creature, a figure emerged, a face twisted in agony, eyes filled with rage and sorrow. "Why do you resist?" it called with a voice both chilling and familiar. The recognition hit Jake like a punch to the gut. That voice, no, it couldn't be Mom. He breathed, horror turning his stomach. "Jake! Focus!" Sarah cried, grounding him in the chaos. "They had to finish this. Don't listen." Mike yelled, wrestling with the fear clawing at him. "It's a trap." Jake's mind spun. The whispers of the shadows twisted reality, blurring everything he knew. Was this a ploy, or was it the truth they had feared all along? Tentatively, he turned the shard towards the spectral figure. "You're not real," he shouted, determination pouring into his voice. "You're just a shadow." The figure wavered, a flicker of doubt mirroring across its features. And the illusions surrounding them began to falter. "Jake!" Sarah shouted again, breaking through the haze. They had to finish this. With a tremendous force, Jake slammed the shard down, channeling every ounce of energy and belief in himself and his friends. "We're not afraid of you." The shadows screamed, a howl of fury and desperation, but there was no turning back. The shard pulsed as the light surged, consuming everything. Absorbing the darkness that had long haunted them, but even as victory loomed, one question hung heavy in the air. What truly awaited them once the shadows were banished? The ground trembled violently, and from the depths of the woods, ancient trees cracked and groaned, hinting at secrets long buried beneath the earth. What would they find? Or had they only awoken something darker lurking just beyond the veil of their understanding? The explosion of light shattered the calm night, a breathtaking clash of brilliance and darkness. As the shadows writhed in agony, Jake felt an odd weight lifting, but uncertainty clawed at his gut. What else had they stirred in that chaos? "Keep pushing," Mike shouted, his voice strained but unwavering. He thrust his hands against the tree, adding his force to Jake's as they made history in a battle against their fears. But the ground shook beneath them, vibrating with an energy that felt alive. Jake glanced sideways at Sarah, her face pale but determined, her eyes reflecting the lingering light from the shard. It was a small comfort amid the chaos closing in around them. "Do you feel that?" Sarah asked, her voice a whisper, as if higher volumes would draw out whatever slumbered beneath. "Yeah, like the world is waking up," Jake replied, straining to keep the light steady. "Whatever we unleashed, it won't stay quiet for long." And then, without warning, an ear-splitting crack echoed through the forest. The ancient oak trembled, and a section of the earth gave way. A dark maw opened, revealing a pit swirling with shadows too thick for light to penetrate, drawing the air from their lungs. "Get back!" Jake yelled, instinctively shoving Sarah and Mike away from the crumbling edge. They stumbled backward, hearts racing, keeping the shard aloft. The shadows surged around the pit, desperate to pull the trio closer. Inside, Jake swore he could see faces twisted in torment, crying out soundlessly for release or revenge. The sheer horror of it rendered him momentarily frozen. He hadn't just banished one shadow. He had opened a door to an entire dimension of despair. "Jake, we have to go. Now." Mike's urgency broke through Jake's panic. "No. We can't leave." Jake turned to the pit, feeling drawn to the shadows. "What if there's a way to stop it?" "We could stop what?" Sarah interjected sharply. "More ghosts. More pain. We need to get out of here." The very ground pulsed with a resonating heartbeat, echoing the urgency in Sarah's voice. Jake shook his head, but he could feel despair creeping like ivy around his resolve. What if we close it? We could seal it, together." Jake proposed, desperately seeking support from them. "Or we could get swallowed by whatever that is." Mike snapped back, eyes darting nervously, panic swept over Jake like a cold wave. Just as he contemplated retreat, something in the depths of the pit flickered a demonic shimmer, resembling the figure of the creature they had just faced. The core of the shadow began to rise, pulling itself from the darkness, manifesting once again with grotesque clarity. The wretched face, twisted with malice, formed once more, this time even angrier, more potent. "Foolish children!" It boomed, a voice layered with sorrowful rage and a deep, aching yearning. "You cannot close what has been awakened." In that instant, Jake remembered his grandmother's stories. She had spoken of ancient artifacts guarding against darkness, but they required the belief of all who wielded them. Desperation fueled him as he turned to face his friends. "Think of the light. You have to believe we can push it back," he implored. Barely facing the swirling madness, Sarah squared her shoulders, taking a tentative breath. Together, she murmured, fingers tightening around the jagged shard. With a sudden rush of determination, Mike joined them, eyes blazing with fierce belief. "Let us do this," he shouted, encouraging the rising hope flickering in their hearts. They pressed their palms together around the shard, amplifying its light. But as their combined energy soared, the shadows erupted, clawing for where desperation turned into terror once again. A terrifying roar echoed, choking the air around them. With the shard glowing with brilliant intensity, the trio fought against the darkness, but against all odds, it just seemed to grow stronger. "The shadows want us!" Jake screamed as despair threatened to overwhelm him, but just as it seemed victory was slipping away again, from deep within the pit, a soft glow emerged. Was it hope or another trap? "Look!" Jake pointed, his heart racing with renewed urgency. There's light coming from the pit. But was that light an ally, or had they only scratched the surface of something more treacherous? As they held their breath, a truth settled deep in Jake's bones: darkness didn't just fight back. It laid its own traps, nurturing secrets buried deep, waiting to be revealed. What waited for them at the edge of that light? Was it salvation or a nightmare yet to be unleashed? The soft glow grew more intense, bathing their faces in a ghostly luminescence. Jake felt a rush of adrenaline, something beyond fear sparking in his veins. It felt like salvation, but a chill crept down his spine as he remembered the shadows clawing at the edge of the pit. What if it's a lure? Sarah whispered, her brows knitting in doubt as she exchanged glued glances with Mike. What if they want us to believe there's hope? Better than standing here like sitting ducks. Mike shot back, poised to sprint toward the light. He hesitated for just a second, looking back to Jake, hoping for direction, and Jake nodded. They had to know what it was, but as they stepped closer to the swirling light, the shadows raged, howling with fury, desperate to hold them back. The air crackled with electrifying tension, but Jake felt a surge of warmth, as if the light was calling to him. "Wait," he shouted, raising a hand to freeze them. They needed a plan. "What if we focus the shard on that glow? Maybe it can lead us to something powerful enough to seal the pit." "What if it backfires?" Sarah countered, the fear creeping back into her voice. "We can't just leave it like this. We have to try." A moment of silence passed, and then Mike clasped the shard tightly, his brow furrowing. "Let us channel everything we've got. If it goes wrong, at least we'll know we fought." He was right, they couldn't let the shadows pull them into despair. Jake nodded, feeling their unity grow, a bond forged in fear and fiery determination. They positioned themselves together, shoulders nearly touching, and as one, they raised the shard, aiming it toward the light. A beam shot forth, piercing the air and striking the fluorescent glow that pulsated from the pit. At first, nothing happened. Sparks sizzled around them, but the shadows roared louder, scrambling like wild beasts. The darkness enveloped them, and Jake felt a breathless despair claw at his chest as he fought to maintain focus. Then, with a sudden burst, the glow flared brighter, blending with the light from the shard. The shadows recoiled momentarily, their pained wails ripping through the air like jagged glass. "Keep going. Don't give up," Sarah screamed, eyes alight with fervor. Energy thrummed between them, flowing with every ounce of faith they could muster. The shard began to resonate, vibrating with a familiar warmth. It was powerful, a force that felt almost alive. The entwined lights merged into a radiant explosion that erupted from the pit, pushing back the shadows with a fury Jake had never witnessed. Faces twisted in anguish briefly solidified, howling as they were cast back, a montage of souls pleading for vengeance and release. But the respite came at a cost. As the shadows receded, something else clawed its way to the surface. Thick, smoky tendrils whipped around, clawing at the edges of the light, angry and relentless. "Jake, watch out!" Mike shouted, barely dodging the sinister grasp. A long, sinuous form emerged from the chaos, a figure draped in waves of darkness, its piercing eyes ablaze with a deep hunger. It laughed with a chilling echo that reverberated through the very soul of the forest. "You foolish ones! Did you think you could unearth the ancient and not pay the price?" It spread its arms wide, drawing in the flickering light, trapping it with an unyielding grip. Jake felt the air grow cold, suffocating terror clawing up his throat. They had awakened something horrific, something that desired more than their defeat. It craved their faith, their very spirits. As the pulsing shadows gathered strength, Jake could sense them tightening around his mind, a power that threatened to overwhelm him. "Focus on the light, Jake. Don't let it take you." Sarah's voice broke through the thick despair, and he felt a flicker of defiance. The light began to shudder, fading as the figure grew stronger. Their plan had failed, and as darkness consumed the brilliance they had created, Jake realized they were nowhere near out of danger. They were at the precipice of something greater, yet more terrifying, just as hope seemed lost. The pit rumbled, and another flash surged from deep within, revealing something that made Jake's heart race. Was it a way out, or the ultimate trap? What more lurked beneath, waiting for them to take one false step? Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they had merely scratched the surface of a much larger nightmare. And the shadows weren't finished yet. Something in the depths stirred again, a reckoning that would test their resolve like never before. Would they be able to cast the darkness away once and for all? Or had they unwittingly sealed their fate for eternity? The ground rumbled violently, sending a jolt through all of them, as if the earth itself were trying to warn them. Jake's heart raced. What was emerging now? The air was thick with panic, making it hard to breathe. An inexplicable force seemed to pull him deeper into the pit, a siren call he could hardly resist. "Stay together!" Mike shouted, gripping the shard even tighter as if it were a lifeline. The shadows writhed violently around them, appearing almost sentient, responding to every flicker of light with a furious hatred that made the hair on Jake's arms stand on end. The pit began to shimmer again, an ominous glow surfacing, revealing glimmers of ancient runes etched deep into the earth, glowing fiercely with a power of their own. "Those symbols. What do they mean?" Sarah murmured, her eyes widening as she took a shaky step forward. Jake couldn't answer. The ancient markings felt alive, pulsating with energy tied directly to the figure of shadows now looming before them. The laughter echoed again, almost mocking. "All this knowledge buried deep, yet you remain blind. You search for light, yet you fear the darkness." It sneered, its form twisting and contorting under the strain of some unseen force. "Shut up!" Jake yelled, fueled by an impulsive rage. "You don't control us." With that, he pressed against the ground, feeling a vibration through his palms as if something lay just beneath the surface, waiting for release. The shard glowed brighter in response, its power mixing with the ancient runes. "Jake, don't," Sarah warned, but he was already unleashing the energy built inside him. The shard responded, racing through the air, striking the symbols. Light erupted from the markings, spiraling upward, intertwining with the light from the shard. The shadows hissed, writhing as if scorched by the brilliance. Jake's entire being felt electric, lifted by the sudden rush of power surging through them all. "Together! Come on!" The trio joined hands, their energies blending seamlessly as they drew from the strength of the shard and the runes. A blinding wave of light exploded around them, pushing against the darkness, a reckoning set in motion, but the figure of shadow was persistent. It clawed at the light, fury and desperation mingling in its piercing gaze. "You'll never escape. I will have what's mine." With every exertion of their effort, the ground shook violently, the ancient runes responding to the clash of light and shadow. It was as if the force of their collective will set off a chain reaction, one that could either save them or doom them. Suddenly, an ear-shattering crack echoed, as the pit split wider, revealing layers of darkness that yawned deeper than they imagined. Tendrils of shadow snaked up like serpents out of the abyss, drawing nearer, slick and glistening with an unnatural sheen. "Get back!" Mike shouted, yanking Sarah to safety just as one of the tendrils lunged, curling around the shard, attempting to crush it. The brilliant light flickered, the united strength waning under the relentless assault. Panic surged through Jake. "Hold on. Don't let it take us." He focused, forcing out every ounce of will he possessed, pouring it into a singular thought: protect the light. The energy from the shard flared one last time, bursting forth with a blinding brilliance that temporarily dispelled the darkness, pushing the shadow figure back. But as the light dimmed, Jake felt the exhaustion swallow him. "It's not enough," he gasped, his hands trembling. In that moment of dwindling resolve, he caught the gleam of something else swirling within the pit of vision, maybe. A flickering glimpse of something they hadn't noticed before, a figure deep within the shadows, an echo of a face he recognized. "Jake! Look!" Sarah's voice broke through his haze of despair, directing his attention to where the shadows swirled more violently than before. And there it was, unmistakably clear, a familiar face, twisted in terror, eyes wide with pain, trapped within the darkness. "Anna!" he whispered, disbelief flooding his chest. The shadows surged, as if emboldened by the sight of her. Could they truly save her and themselves at the same time? Jake's heart pounded as he realized this was not just about them anymore. The past had stepped into their present, urging them to confront not only the darkness at bay but their own truths. What choice would they make now? With the haunted eyes of the trapped figure watching, Jake felt the weight of a decision crashing down. Would they plunge deeper into danger to rescue a piece of their past, or forge ahead, risking everything to attempt an escape? The shadows whispered promises of confusion and despair, teasing the edges of their resolve. And without another second to spare, Jake understood, the real battle was just beginning. How far would they go to break the chains of the past? The shadows twisted and churned around them, darkness clawing for their very souls. Jake's heart raced as the face of Anna, lost, trapped, and writhing in despair, seared itself into his mind. Somehow, she felt so close yet impossibly out of reach. Her eyes were wide, filled with a silent plea for rescue. "Jake!" Sarah's voice sliced through, urging him into action. "We need to get her out." The shadows recoiled, fueling a new urgency in Jake. That face, could it be that Anna was one of the lost souls, just like them? "No. We can't let her stay here." Mike shouted, his own fear morphing into determination as he stepped forward. "We have to do something." Jake nodded, adrenaline surging as he clutched the shard of glass tighter, focusing on the light emanating from its core. They were fighting not just for their lives but for Anna's freedom from this wretched nightmare. His conviction ignited a spark deep within him, grounding him in this perilous moment. "Together!" Jake called out, positioning Sarah and Mike at his sides. They formed a tight circle, hearts pounding as they combined their strength once more, aiming the shard toward the haunting visage of Anna. "We're coming, Anna." The shadows writhed violently, a tempest of raw rage surging toward them. "Foolish children." The shadow figure roared again, but they were undeterred, driven by something stronger than fear-hope. Jake channeled everything into the shard, a blinding light shooting forth like a beacon, illuminating the darkness. The shadows screamed, twisting away from the brilliance, and Anna's tortured face shifted, her expression morphing into one of recognition and relief. "Grab hold!" Jake shouted, directing his focus at the heart of the darkness, where Anna was trapped. The runic patterns concealed deep beneath the soil sparked with life once more, responding to their collective will, forming a bridge toward freedom. The ground shook violently, crackling with energy as tendrils of shadow snaked out, attempting to ensnare them. But they pressed on, the light growing brighter with every ounce of their determination. "You're not alone, Anna," Sarah cried, her voice steady despite the chaos. As they pushed deeper into the light, their surroundings erupted into a kaleidoscope of color, bursting forth like fireworks and dissipating the shadows momentarily. "You can pull her through," Mike yelled, his voice thick with urgency. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled and a powerful rush surged within the pit, sending waves of energy outward. The fabric of time and reality began to ripple and distort. In that moment, everything shifted. "Look! Something's happening." Jake pointed. A shimmering portal began to form over the pit, a gateway brimming with light. Faces from the shadows swirled within like wailing spirits trapped in a net. "Hold on to the shard. We can do this," Jake shouted, adrenaline thrumming in his veins as he focused on Anna, her face hovering brighter in the light. With one final push, they drove the shard forward, and the raw energy spilling from it struck the center of the portal, causing a brilliant explosion of light. Jake felt a surge of warmth, wrapping around his heart like a powerful embrace. The howl of shadows filled the air, raging against the brilliance but growing weaker as more faces emerged from the depths. Moments of torment lifted like mist, swept away by the light. "Go to the light," Jake shouted again. Anna's anguished expression transformed into one of determination. With each flicker of energy, the portal widened, pulling the shadows closer, but they cast aside their doubts, aiming for the light that promised salvation. One last surge, a wave of hope, and suddenly, Anna broke free. She emerged from the swirling void, her body falling into Jake's arms, gasping for breath, alive and real. "Jake!" she sobbed, relief flooding through her eyes as she held him tightly. "Let us go," Sarah shouted, snapping them from their embrace. The shadows, enraged at the loss of their captive, surged back with ferocity, tendrils whipping crazily, trying to reclaim what was given away. With renewed strength, the trio pulled Anna close, the light from the shard providing a shield around them as they backed away from the pit. The darkness shrieked, claws of rage grasping in futility, their power fading against the lucent force emanating from the shard. "Now! We have to seal it!" Jake yelled, guiding them back with urgency. As they steadied themselves before the crack in the earth, energy pulsed from the shard and the runes on the ground, forging an impenetrable barrier against the shadows, trapping them within the pit. Voices echoed in sobs and cries of despair as the darkness dissipated, vanquished into the void once and for all. "It's done!" Mike gasped, releasing a breath of disbelief. They stood gathered together with Anna, their hearts pounding, their grip unyielding as the remnants of darkness faded away, leaving behind quiet. They looked at one another, taking in the quiet of the night, echoing like a sacred vow. They had survived. They had freed a tortured soul. Jake turned to Anna, his throat tight. "I thought I lost you." "I thought I was lost," Anna replied, her voice thick with emotion. But they had forged a bond, unwavering against shadows that threatened to splinter their reality. They moved into the warmth of moonlight, something beautiful blossoming amid their fear. As they walked away from the pit, the air felt different, less oppressive, almost peaceful. But Jake knew their lives would be marked by this night forever. "Together we'll tell the world," Sarah vowed. They nodded, each feeling the power of their connection, knowing they could confront whatever might come next. But in the depths of the night, shadows lingered, whispering secrets, always waiting. They took a step forward, ready to face a new dawn, but resilient against the remnants of darkness behind them. And under the crescent moon, they sealed their bond, stronger for what they had conquered. As the night faded into dawn, a warmth swept through them. They had not only won a battle against the dark but also discovered the power of their bond, a lesson they would carry till the end. Each breath felt like a new beginning now. Before you fade into the background, make sure you subscribe immediately to catch the next incredible story packed with thrills and wonder. You need to stay tuned because every moment matters. Smash that like button now and help fuel our journey as we explore more thrilling tales. Your support is everything. Don't let your voice drown in silence. Flood the comments section with your reactions and wild theories about what you just witnessed, and don't forget to instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who crave adrenaline-packed adventures. Don't wait even one more second. Help them to join us in this unforgettable journey.